It's a pleasure and an honor to join you as we remember 19th century of heroes, 100 years of service in our nation's emergency 911 force, responding in the most dire times of need. And frankly, it's just great to be back among you. Here in Washington, D.C., you can understand by once in a while you need a shot in the arm of good old Marine Corps spirit. Thank you so much. It also, being here tonight, reminds me of the special bond between comrades in arms, brothers in arms, and sharing something that our most articulate Supreme Court Justice, himself a combat veteran, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., called the incommunicable experience of war. For even when we are not formally introduced, you and I, to each other, we know at a glance each other's character, and it's probably why I feel so welcome and so much at peace when I'm here among you. I also want to say this to the 19th Association. I appreciate deeply in my current job where I look over the Army, the Navy, Air Force, Marines, allies, and I really appreciate what you do as you keep alive the memories of the service at times, the exemplary service at all times, the duty that you carried out, and I think particularly you keep alive the memories of those who cannot join us here tonight, those 19th sailors and Marines who made the ultimate sacrifice defending our nation's freedom. No matter what the cost in blood or in their peace of mind, they stayed true when we called for them. And I commend this association also for welcoming the Gold Star mothers, several of whom I've met this evening, and the way you've welcomed them with open arms to your family since they took such a grievous loss, and to the families of our fallen who join us. Just remember that the thoughts of your loved ones live on in abundance among their comrades, for we never forget their sacrifice. And I would tell you too that here are Marines among you, the Gold Star families, who knew your loved ones so well, and they were our brothers when they fell. They were never alone, they were never forgotten, and they'll never be forgotten, but they will be forever young. It's no secret to any in this room that 19th has a storied history, for you helped write it, and forging its reputation as one of the most ferocious and one of the most aggressive battalions in the Marine Corps history. They were formed, as you know, over 100 years ago, and they served initially at Guantanamo Bay, and I'm sure they were grousing there in Cuba about missing the big one, but 19th didn't have to wait long. In the Pacific, they got their first gritty taste of combat, fighting from Bougainville and the Solomons to Guam. Tough fighting indeed. And your predecessors proved their fortitude in one of the fiercest and bloodiest battles of any war, and that was to seize Iwo Jima and paving the way for Allied victory in the Pacific, a legacy that their successors, that you all inherited. Since those early days, 19th time and again proved their mettle. Thanks to the strong Marines and sailors who carried this hard-earned legacy of courage forward into the jungles of Vietnam, breaking records that no battalion would ever want to break. During nearly 4 years in combat against an unrelenting enemy, 19th suffered the most brutal conditions and suffered the highest killed in action rate in Marine Corps history. You served our nation valiantly as 167 members of the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines lost their lives in just 1 month at the start of Operation Prairie. You served our nation fearlessly as 84 more made the ultimate sacrifice in the name of freedom in just 1 day on July 2nd, 1967 during Operation Buffalo up on the Strip. You served our nation boldly as you held the line at Quai Son, alongside your fellow Marines and sailors, enduring a constant enemy siege for 77 days when the whole world was predicting you could fall, and you held the line. And as you swept through the Aisha Valley during the last major American offensive of the war, other units might have crumbled under these conditions. They were merciless conditions, but the Marines of 19th stood resolute in the face of such daunting odds with their corpsmen at their side, and never losing your spirit or your faith in one another. As then Lieutenant Wesley Fox looked back on those days in the Ashaw Valley, before he passed away last year, he summed up the fighting spirits of this battalion in no uncertain terms, stating simply, why did my Marines go forward? I just had some great Marines, and that sums up one night, some great Marines. For those of you here this evening who served in Vietnam, it was you and your generation of Marines who raised me in the Marine Corps and teaching me the grim realities of infantry combat that I needed to learn and lead effectively. I will never forget the irredeemable debt that I personally owe your generation for those letters, and I hope it paid off when I led Marines into the fight. Since those days when 19 earned its Walking Dead nickname, the battalion has continued to serve our country, as you know, with honor and through the good times and bad, and it's during the bad times that loyalty counts, not the good times. You helped secure victory in Desert Storm. You shipped out to Somalia during Operation Restore Hope, providing much-needed humanitarian care to civilians in need, showing America's compassion. You are bolstering not only America's power of intimidation, but also its equally important power of inspiration to the world in the process. You have held the line in this century against murderous terrorist foes, an insane enemy who thought by hurting us on 9/11 he could scare us, but 19 didn't scare. As 19 once again answered the call, deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan, they were a key part of the global war on terror, and when we called on them, we knew they would stand tall. We need not look far to see the shining example of the courageous legacy this newest generation carries forward from the 19 Marines of wars past. Now, among our Gold Star mothers here tonight, wives, fathers, it's the mother of Lance Corporal Jordan Harder I want to just mention this evening because she represents so much of what we all stand for. When an explosive-laden truck barreled towards Lance Corporal Harder and a fellow Marine from another battalion on the street of Al Anbar in 2008, the two did not hesitate to sacrifice their own lives to save 150 Marine and Iraqi police behind them from the powerful explosive. Instead, to borrow the words of General John Kelly, my great friend and patriot, the two Marines leaned into danger, firing as fast as they could work their weapons. There wasn't time to think about their lives and deaths, but there was more than enough time for the two very brave young men to do their duty. And such is the tradition that all of you here in this room tonight have handed down. And to Ms. Lyles, Gold Star mother, we stand with you and every Gold Star mother, every Gold Star family, every day, just like Jordan stood tall on the greatest test a man can ever test. And just as we stand with all of you this evening, that will never end. The 1st Battalion 9th Marines' unwavering dedication to duty, no matter the cost, makes certain the names of 19 are solidified in history with the hardest, toughest, and most dedicated Marines. Pindar the poet, about 2,500 years ago, reminded us that left unsung, the noblest deeds will die. Thanks to gatherings like this, memories of your fellow Marines, like Jordan and so many others who died protecting our experiment in a democracy, the one that you and I call America, their lives will never be lost in the compost of history's events. So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, Marines and sailors, families, I come before you with a deep sense of gratitude and respect. Your service displays the optimism and the courage that defines America. No matter who else tried to define America, nothing can refute your example. This type of character you display of optimism and courage, this kind of character breeds that in us so long as we retain our respect and our fundamental friendliness toward one another as fellow Americans, no matter what in our raucous democracy we might disagree with each other on. In closing, I want to borrow some words from the epitaph of a soldier from the greatest generation, the World War II generation, for we are bonded too with the soldiers who fought beside us. He was a baseball legend, and growing up, every one of my generation wanted to be Jackie Robinson, the man who'd served as a lieutenant in tank destroyer units in World War II in Europe, the man who broke the color lines in baseball. Every one of us wanted to slide into home plate like that sparkling baseball player. But I'd read that he had written his own epitaph. So on a cold, windy, rainy January night in New York City, I went out to Cypress Hills Cemetery, much to the chagrin of my bodyguards who had to stand in this wet, cold cemetery, convinced that I am, in fact, an idiot. And he read his epitaph that he wrote about his own life, and I think about all of you in this room who put others first, He wrote, "A life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives." Now, all of you in 1-9 know and have lived the true meaning of this message. For America is like a bank. If you want to take something out, you must first put something in. Those of you who left behind life's well-lit avenues to serve have, without a doubt, put something in our nation's bank, as have your families who join you here this evening, ensuring that future generations of Americans and U.S. Marines will be forever in your debt for your stoic example in the face of daunting odds. And just as your predecessors took Shirabachi and held the line at Khe Sanh, and in Somalia, in Anbar, in Helmand, and beyond, so long as your Marines continue in the future to carry out the mission of 1-9, and when trouble looms, I'm sure 1-9's colors will be uncased again, that mission to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy with fire and maneuver, I stand before you absolutely confident, having reached some modest success in our line of work and now serve as your Secretary of Defense. I'm confident that if called to serve again, the Marines of today and tomorrow will always be ready to hold the line, thanks to 1-9's stellar example, which will tell them what they have to do when things go wrong. You know, I was looking at a Navy Cross citation for one of your Vietnam Marines before I came over here. It was for a Second Lieutenant Edward Malone. And there's one phrase jumped out at me when it talks, then Lieutenant Malone, George, with utter disregard for his own safety, 22 February 1969. And then I looked at young Lance Corporal Jordan Harder's citation, and this was the phrase that jumped out at me: ignoring the grave personal risk. So you see, on 22 April 2008, how your example is echoed down through 49 years. 49 years later, 1-9, the passage of that legacy continues down to the youngest, too young to drink a beer legally, the little guys. But already men at age 19, at age 20, at age 18, I would just say that that is why I have confidence as I send Marines into battle today, as I sign those deployment orders for soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines. As I do that, I have absolute confidence because your example will still ring true long after speeches by Secretaries of Defense have been lost in the compost of events. Sailors and Marines, ladies, you remind us what we're fighting for. I would just tell you it's a great honor to be here. I want you to have a wonderful reunion together, and I would tell you that your example is worth all the gold in Fort Knox for when we go into the next fight. Thank you very much, Semper Fi.